fascinating conversation about the way they build their organization is they're willing to be boring. They will build the offensive line. They'll take their swings. They'll draft the boring guy. And they will make sure, because as we're looking at this draft and you're wondering, what do the Browns do at number 2? You know, whatever they do is going to be wrong, right? Because they're not going to take an offensive lineman. And that's generally what these bad teams just don't do. They don't be boring. They want to energize their fan base, and that's why they're bad.
So there's a phrase going on around the NFL and NFL media lately, Mike. It's called eating your vegetables when it comes to the draft. And what the term simply means is when you're up and picking and you're building up your roster and you got first round, second round pick, right? There's always going to be a bunch of shiny toys. There's going to be some Ashton Genties. There's going to be some Malik Neighbors. There's going to be a Tyler Warren or a Colton Loveston and from Michigan. And you
tight end.
Yeah. And you just start to imagine what your life would be like, what your team would be like if you had this nice, great, shiny toy, right? And we call the linemen, defensive linemen, offensive linemen, the vegetables. It's like, like you just mentioned, Trey Thomas, right? Great player, great, but when you compare an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman to the shiny toy, the fans don't get as happy about it. But the best teams eat their veggies, Mike. The best teams like the Steelers, like the Ravens, like the Eagles, of course, the Packers, they're not afraid to draft that O-lineman or D-lineman even ahead of time that you really haven't heard of, compared to the really nice, shiny toy. And he's done well.
Yeah, and you talk about Trey Thomas. Yeah, he wasn't like maybe not a Hall of Famer, but like, a Pro Bowl level guy. And that started there. They got Trey Thomas, they got John Runyon, and that kind of changed the whole dynamic of the Eagles as we know him. As I said, when I was growing up, the Eagles was just wretched. I mean, like Ron Solt, you're trying to throw money at him, he gets popped for stuff. I mean, they just kept missing and missing and missing. You had Randall running around for his life back there. And even back then, you have no offensive line, you can't win. And I think, which is again, their offensive line is all 5 spots you feel comfortable in. Yes, the right guards. And then that allows them to take the exciting guy when the time calls for it, instead of teams that build the opposite way. The Giants, they're in the 3rd pick of the draft here. They need an offensive lineman, right? That's what they need to do. The Browns, they need an offensive lineman. They're probably going to take Travis Hunter.
Yeah, although Travis Hunter is the best player overall in the draft. So I would put that under the eating your vegetables because, A, he's the best player. B, cornerback is an important spot. To me, it's more like the overdrafted quarterback or like when you draft the receiver who runs like a 4.2, even though he may not be as productive as the one who nearly ran a 4.4. Like the Raiders are always known for drafting the fastest guy instead of the most productive guy. But yeah, you see it a lot of times. And quarterbacks fall into that shiny toy territory too, where you see guys who, and I guess Shedeur Sanders might be somewhat of an example of a guy who probably will get picked in the top, if not the top 5 or 10, 15, right? And you'll talk to people around the NFL and they'll say probably a 2nd round talent, 3rd round talent maybe. He's got some issues he's got to clean up, but he's going to get overdrafted. But the team that picks him, at least if you have a good offensive line, right, and you pick him, you can at least say, all right, well, we're giving him a head start. If you have a bad offensive line and you're picking Shedeur Sanders, who had a bad offensive line in college, right, I mean, you're not helping him out any. Like the Giants with Daniel Jones. Maybe he would have never been really good, but he certainly didn't get off to a great start getting banged around all the time.
No, and they're almost in a no-win situation because they need a quarterback. There's not really a quarterback. They don't love the Sanders, and now all of a sudden, what do? You probably go with a defensive player, and that really hasn't worked out for teams in the draft either. These teams like, okay, I have Myles Garrett. That's great. I can't win with Myles Garrett. I'm constantly losing. Teams like Houston, they took Mario Williams with the number 1 overall pick. That didn't work. Trayvon Walker. You've never really seen that work out for teams either. It makes what the Eagles do even that much more impressive.
Yeah, and the fact that they found their quarterback in the 2nd round was, adds a layer to that. The Eagles do a really nice job. We talked about this on Monday of what you call draft-proofing your roster, which means like it's not perfect, but you sign as many free agent 1-year guys. You sign as much depth and competition pieces as possible so that you don't go into the draft.
That looks like Moshe froze up for a second there. We'll try to. Oh, there he goes. He's back.
And that's why I come the team lately, kind of like the Ravens, where everybody looks at them and says, how did the league let that guy how did they let Jordan Davis? How did they let Jalen Carter? How did they let the Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver fall? All didn't have to, trade up a bunch, like 7, 8, 9, 10 slots to fill a need. They might do it to get a guy they like, but they don't do it because they absolutely need to fill that hole immediately.
Well, it's funny. I we're about 3 weeks away from the draft tomorrow. So they got Jalen Carter because he had that that whole situation in Georgia. He got pulled off draft boards by teams, and the Eagles said, "Hey, look, we did our homework. We'll draft this guy." And it's funny because Walter Nolan's getting that rap, and it's like you could almost feel like if the board at 32, he's the guy that makes the sense for the Eagles. They'll say, "Hey, we feel pretty comfortable that we can get this guy under wraps, that his off-the-field stuff is not going to talent," and you take him at number 32.
Right, and then the rest of the league would say, how did you let Walter Nolan fall all the way to of all the teams? It's kind of felt – I know people felt that way when the Chiefs got Xavier Worthy, right? They're like, oh, my God, the rich get richer. Now, Nolan would be interesting on the Eagles only because they were able to do it with Jalen Carter at a time because, you had Jason Kelce, you had Fletcher Cox, you had Brandon Graham. You don't have those three guys. You do have leaders, lane leader, but Walter Nolan – next to Jalen Carter, or without a true elder statesman in that D-tackle room, and, wondered if that would be the right type of complement and mix.
We're talking D-tackle. Let's stay there for a second because the draft's coming up, and we think Walter Nolan or someone 32. What do you envision Jordan Davis? They didn't pick up the fifth-year option. Do they want more from him? Do they not think that he has lived up to what they wanted him to be? Are they looking for an upgrade there? Would they rather lessen his role? I know that was a lot there, but you see what I'm saying is him being in the fifth year now, I find him to be an interesting people. If you polled the people on the street, what do you think of Jordan Davis? Oh, he's been a bust. I don't know if he's been a bust or if he's exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, I feel like there's an alternate universe for Inside the Birds listeners because whenever we talk about Jordan Davis, we get a ton of YouTube comments from people who think he has done an excellent job, the first-round pick, and that his job should only have to be to stop the run. And if he's only playing in there to stop the run and playing 15 snaps, well, then he's excellent. And they're going to be quite surprised that the Eagles did not pick up the fifth-year option, even though Adam and I have been saying for a while, look, Jordan Davis has not lived up to the expectations. There's no way you can trade up for a guy in the first round, play him 15 snaps in the most important game of the year, your Super Bowl, and then consider that, in his third season, by the way, and then consider that said in his introductory press conference when they drafted Jordan Davis, if down the road we are not playing him on third down, then it didn't work out the way we envisioned because they thought they would coach him up into becoming a player who not only was a run stopper, but also would give you a significant amount of pass rush or at least push the pocket, right, Mike? It may not be a great Fletcher Cox-like pass rusher, but he can command two blockers and free up everybody else. Well, the guy, I think Greg Cosell had this stat for us. I think he played 1 or 2 snaps all year long that was 3rd and 5 or longer. They do not envision him as a pass rusher. He is not a part of their 4-man rush. They do not want to pay upwards of double-digit millions or whatever that fifth-year option would have been. And I don't see them giving him an extension unless he gets some kind of 1-year deal, at the end of the year, if free agency doesn't work out. Or unless in the first 5 or 6 games of next year, he suddenly overnight became a 3-down lineman who was just a Dexter Lawrence type player. Then you'd have to consider it, but he's been far from that so far.
All right, we've been asking the listeners to text in questions for football at 4 today, so let's get some of the text questions that have been coming in. Jimmy in Galloway, Jeff, he wants to know, what's the biggest need heading into the draft for you, corner, edge rusher, or something else? Jimmy in Galloway. Appreciate it, Jimmy.
Well, the draft is supposed to be about the future and not need. Certainly corner, edge rusher. They're thin at defensive tackle, especially if you're just talking about having Jalen Carter as dominant, but Moro Jomo, you don't know what to expect. Jordan Davis may only have a year left. I think tight end, even if Dallas Goedert is still on the team, tight end for the future is going to be a need because that this would be Goddard's last year, and I still think that when all is said and done, he won't be. So safety, I mean, honestly, like I said, the Eagles have done a nice job. They've signed players at all these positions to be competitive, and they have picks.
I want to give you a follow-up to this. Do you think there is a drafted player that starts on this team?
I think there's a drafted player that's from this year's draft.
Somebody that they draft this year. Because, when you see a starter on this team, is the draft choice.
The cornerback in the first round, the expectation is he's going to be better than Keely Ringo or Adoree Jackson. That's just the bottom line on it, right? If you take a safety in the first round, which I never know at 32, but a first-round safety has to beat out a third-round pick in Sidney Brown who hasn't gotten on the field. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Defensive tackle. You take Walter Nolan in the first round. Is he going to beat out Moro Ojomo? Possibly. Maybe if not by week 1, then week 4, 5, 6.
He would be one. He would be one. I would agree with you there. All right, let's get to Chase in Mays Landing. Mo, should the Eagles consider trading up to land a game changer or play it safe and go the depth route?
That's a great call. Great question, Chase. And it's almost a little bit like I need the context, right? I'm a firm believer that when you're a really good team year in, year out, like the Ravens, like the Eagles, Chiefs, that it does pay to be aggressive because you're not going to be picking from the upper echelon pool very often, right? I mean, they got lucky with the whole Jalen Carter because that first round pick became an extra one for them. But so if there's a guy that they got in like the top 15, or a real high grade on, and for whatever reason he's there at 25, 26 to slide, then it makes sense to go up to get that game changer. But I can also tell you it would make sense to do the opposite. If you're at 32 and a lot of your first round guys are gone and there's a cluster of good players that you all have in the second round, it's a good time to go play it safe and build depth.
And you'll see the board materializing from 32, right? You'll start checking guys off that you're like, I wish that guy fell. Because I'm wondering who the guy is that they are willing to pull the trigger on to move up for. Like, we're not quite there yet, I think, 3 weeks out, but you start to feel, you're going to start to hear names.
Go for the guy, go for the position. It would be like an edge rusher, right? Like maybe a Donovan Ezaraku or something like that. Or
have you been practicing that name?
He's from Williamstown, so I got it. Cornerback maybe. Edge rusher, I said Donovan, Alexander, or Derek Harmon. Is he within reach? Then you start to look at that and say, is it worth it to go up there?
All right, let's get another one. By the way, good job by the people out there. We got a lot of them for you today. 609-403-0973. We'll kind of do like a Mosher mailbag here, each week and kind of get more listener questions. So I don't have to come up with all the questions all the time. It puts a lot of pressure on me. Scotty and Margate, which position group, I like this question, would you double dip at in the draft if you were Howie? That's a great question.
That is a great question. That's D tackle maybe because it's a very strong.
I guess what he's asking is get in the second round, same position.
Right. Yeah. No, D tackle probably. I would do that there. Double dipping a tight end as far as free guy. I don't think they would do it like back-to-back rounds, like second and third. That you would never do that for a tight end. But certainly D tackle or edge. I think that those would be. Oh, I'm sorry. And also offensive line. I mean, you need a future replacement for Lane Johnson at some point who could, if he doesn't start, serve as your swing tackle. And you could also certainly bring in somebody to compete at guard with Steen.
All right, let's see. Let's get Matt in Summers Point here. I'll try to get that up on the screen. There we go. Which new free agent addition are you most excited to see this fall? Matt in Summers Point.
Well, it's going to be interesting because excitement is different for different people. I had zero excitement for this guy until Nick Sirianni started raving about him. But Avery Williams is a guy they brought in because he has played running back, cornerback, and returner in the NFL. Now, he hasn't played just running back snaps for the Falcons 2 years ago. He's mainly been a return specialist, but Nick Sirianni went out of his way in the backs room, which means he ain't going to be, I don't think, like this ball carrier. He's too slender and slight of frame, but I got some kind of offensive gadget weapon type, in mind for him, along with being a punt returner and a kick returner. So I'm excited about that. And as far as the main bigger names, We've seen Adoree Jackson. A.J. Dillon's got to stay healthy.
My answer is easily Ojulari.
Yeah, that's a good one. I shouldn't have to my Avery Williams. Yeah,
gotcha. All right, let's go to Phil in Brigantine. Mike and Geoff, if one of the top 2 tight ends drops to the 20s, do they move up?
I mean, moving up from 32 to 20-something is going to cost you. So it's not as close as you might think. If it's 29, then maybe you got a discussion, but I don't see that happening with the top 2 tight ends. If so, maybe, but it is a good tight end class for the first 2 or 3 rounds. So if you lose out on Tyler Warren, if you lose out on Colston Loveland, that's the name I butchered earlier, Mason Taylor and Ferguson from Oregon, and Greg Cosell has been on our show, and our tight end outlook is coming out soon with him, his breakdowns. But Arroyo from Miami, people really, really like. He can stretch the field. There's a decent number of tight ends. So I don't think you're going to be trading draft value to move up for a tight end in the first round.
All right, Steven Vineland, which player is most likely to have a breakout season in 2025? These are good ones. I like this question because I'll give you my answer first. The breakout season guy, I think it's everyone's obvious answer, was Nolan Smith, right?
For last year?
Well, to have a breakout this year is like last year he had a good end of the year, so now he'd be everybody's pick for the breakout type of guy, right?
I tell you what, I had a different guy in mind, though.
Okay.
Did you have a different guy in mind, or was that your guy?
Let me hear yours.
Only because this guy sort of has, even hard to believe, but even more of an athletic profile is Jalix Hunt. And right now,
there you go.
Nolan Smith took a little bit, right? I mean, there were some questions about, could he play the edge? And then for the first 5 or 6 weeks, there wasn't much there. He really did start to come on a little bit middle to the end of the season. Jalix Hunt got in there and immediately showed you he can do some things that, including run defense, like shedding offensive tackles, shedding blocks to get and chase down ball carriers. I mean, that's beyond what you would expect from a guy who only played a year, I think, or 2 of edge rusher because he was a safety at Cornell. So what this guy was able to do he didn't
even play at like a good Ivy League football school. He was like one of the weaker ones, yeah.
Right. And then he had the great growth spurt. So, I mean, I almost feel like the potential on the upside for Jalix Hunt is as good, if not better, than Nolan Smith.
Joe in Atlantic City, what's one offseason move the Eagles should have made but haven't yet?
Oh, that's a really good question. Wow. Probably signing all right. I would have loved to have seen the Eagles sign Calais Campbell. I forget where he went. Arizona, maybe? He went somewhere that I think he's already been once before. But this is a guy who can play all along the line. He can give you that sort of nose shade that Jordan Davis has played. He can play the 3. He can play the 5. He's a veteran. He's a great guy, great leader, good human being. And I think, like I said, if you wanted to draft a guy like Walter Nolan or somebody who came with a little character risk and put him next to Jalen Carter, you would like an elder statesman in that room. And I've always been a fan of his height, his length, the player that he is, the person that he is. I thought it would have been a nice veteran 1-year deal for him.
I like this question. We'll end on this one. Thanks to all the people who have been sending questions in. We'll do this with Moshe and some of the other guys here on the Football at 4. Would you be okay with the Eagles using their first-round pick on an offensive weapon, or does it have to be defense? That's from Calvin in Upper Township.
Yeah, because it's funny, right? Because if you think of Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden, really good upper echelon talent, but for whatever reason, maybe it's character, medicals, I don't know, you see him falling into the lower end of the first round in a lot of mocks, and it's like, man, if he was there at 32, you've got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, but if this guy is an upper echelon talent, how do you pass on him, right? I mean, how do you pass on someone like Luther Burden if he clears, a lot of those hurdles for you? It would be hard if you're saying best player available. So I give the Eagles a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I didn't used to, but I think they've really nailed the draft the last few years, and they've gotten their process a lot better since 2020. So if a wide receiver or the tight end, absolutely. I assume we're tight end is an offensive weapon, right? If it's the Michigan kid or the Penn State kid, yeah, I would be fine with them using the 32nd pick on it.
Okay, the draft, of course, you can listen to right here on 97.3 ESPN. Our draft off swing suite at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. We're looking forward to that day. We're going to be giving away a pair of tickets to see the Eagles play from club box seats at Lincoln Financial Field. We've got an overnight stay for Ocean Casino. We've got other great prizes all throughout the day. Our longest drive competition can win you an overnight stay and other prizes. Geoff Mosher and the Inside the Birds guys, I'm sure you have plenty planned leading up and for draft day as well.
Absolutely. We've been previewing the draft with Greg Cosell breaking down every single position from a tape standpoint, and our analytics guy, Sam Finkel, our expert standpoint, and we just keep podcasts all throughout the week and leading up to the draft. It's really good intel.
So make sure you follow the guys Inside the Birds, of course, and here on Football at 4, we'll do some more Mosher mailbag questions next time he is on here. So thanks to everybody for getting those in. We'll do it again next week with Geoff. He's back on Mosher Monday here on Football at 4. Thanks, man.
See you, Mike.
All right, there you go. Geoff Mosher, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast.